Hey everyone, it's Zach with Palantir Research. Joe Lonsdale, a Palantir co-founder, had an interview in London today with Bloomberg, and they touched a lot on his outlook on AI and regulation, which of course highly affects how Palantir is perceived, but does give an interesting hint he may be trying to soon at least swoon the UK just a little bit, which can affect the NHS deal. Now, day to day, Joe isn't running anything in the show, but still, it is important to see his opinion when it comes to this, and I'll give my thoughts as well after. Now, the big headline is regulating AI. His overall outlook is there is more positive upside and should see this as an industrial revolution. He did bring up the previous industrial revolution, of course, you think of in the late 1800s to early 1900s, where wealth and productivity grew huge for the countries involved. Even with the risks of misinformation today, losing jobs, and even the Terminator-esque kind of global extinction from AI, he still believes in this upside. Now, his perspective, though, on the information front, misinformation side, is just that you just can't really regulate that, especially around freedom of speech. With AI, it will accelerate this issue, but that means going to be a challenging thing when it comes to being informed and deciphering truth yourself, but you still have to tread rough waters if you're trying to regulate or even compel speech, which is very dangerous. Now, I won't get too deep into that, and I know there's many opinions on that, but he does bring up purposeful libel, which is of course something we do today, basically bad-mouthing someone you know isn't true. Just proving in court is another thing though, so maybe AI might play a role in that and possibly accelerating that or making it easier or harder to prove that. But the main idea from this discussion is that Joe thinks this needs to be very limited in the regulation of AI, like how you wouldn't regulate speech. Because we are still on the forefront of this technology. You don't know exactly how to apply this today, but the upsides are very, very clear because you can do so much with your data and empower users today. But he does clearly distinct existential threats are something that we need to be very involved in, even governments, especially when applying regulation to AI. He does bring up bad actors with an arms race of AI, superclusters of GPUs, like you could think of China, but reiterates we just need to watch AI closely, but not to kill it in its infancy when we're still trying to get the productivity gains. Now, this segues perfectly into Elon Musk's pause for AI. Basically, they asked him if he agrees with that. And he brings up the same points that Alex Karp has brought up a lot, reiterating, which I full-heartedly agree with as well. It doesn't make sense to pause when you have China developing their AI and other bad actors out there, and we know their ethical standards are quite different to AI, especially when it comes to internal surveillance. Now, when it comes to specific AI regulation in Europe, he clearly states that the US and China are on the forefront of AI development, whereas Europe really isn't. But does warn if they regulate too heavily, they will kill their own chance at an AI industrial revolution, but does get into the UK on having one actual upside in Brexit, which is Europe goes so deep into regulation that the UK has the opportunity to develop AI much more freely on their own and, of course, get ahead there. Now, it's speculation on my part, but he's obviously interviewing in London, and the AI hub will be open there alongside Palantir, so it can be an attempt to help their image in the UK area leading up to the NHS deal, which is huge, of course. Now, especially if people can perceive AI as making them wealthier and prosperous, but who knows, right, if the UK people actually agree with this. Then they bring up NATO and the overall increase in defense spending in Europe in response to the war in Ukraine. This is very publicized here, but basically Palantir has been heavily involved and should see upside, but it's still a wait and see kind of game. He does bring up historically that Europe has not held its weight in spending for NATO. You can see this a lot with their 2% GDP goal here. Not a lot of them have met that. So maybe the war is just a kickstart here to hopefully keep the trend going and increasing that spending and, of course, pulling their weight. But this might also just be a temporary bump due to the situation. Then they close out on American politics, so I won't comment too much here because it's more personal to Joe than the whole company of Palantir itself, considering we know Palantir is an open discourse kind of company where they give many different views on politics and can't necessarily be brittled down to one kind of view. They've thrived during a Republican and Democratic administration when it comes to government spending, probably because their solution actually works regardless of your politics. But I'll leave it up to you guys to discuss in the comments your thoughts there. But what are my overall opinions on this interview? And there are two big points, which are the regulation aspect and then specifically going into the UK itself when it comes to regulation. I think it comes at a good time, especially being in London where they're interviewing, and they're still vying strongly for that NHS contract. Palantir needs to be able to spread their perspective that the UK can be a bastion of AI development and should benefit from doing so and the people themselves. Now, on how the UK people actually perceive this, I don't know. From my perspective, he didn't do anything to cause alarm here. I'm not saying he knocked it out of the park and people are just going to go say, yay, Palantir, but I think that he didn't drop the ball. And the other big elephant is overall regulation. We know Europe will probably be the most strictest when it comes to AI development, at least commercially, when it comes to the US and UK in comparison. And China is probably a mixed bag where the government will be free to do anything with AI development when it comes at least to government and military applications. Now, for the insiders who are with the party, of course, the CCP will probably benefit on the commercial side as well because they can use that information and technology. But it will be interesting to see if their commercial side has a huge bastion of AI development as well and will be even allowed to do this, or if the government will stamp down pretty hard on them. You never really know. But commercially, to develop AI in the US, I'd put my money there, honestly. We've already got the arms race started, per se, happening, and that's great when it comes to moving fast and finding applications and finding value. But we'll probably come to terms of the dangers, especially when it comes to what Palantir's AIP product is directly involved in, regulating and maintaining governance over the relationship of your proprietary data, LLMs, public data, or even third-party LLMs. And this involves different levels of user access when it comes to the data itself, but also the outputs they can generate and people who can also view that. Now, that's why I think Palantir is poised to be a dominant player in AI, because they've built the infrastructure around deploying it in a smart way, especially when there's always a runaway potential. They've been developing this in a government and military context where there are going to be AI handoffs because there's people involved. Now it comes down to, are they going to actually apply this very strongly on the commercial side? But we'll have to see how this actually becomes adopted. But let me know your thoughts overall on Palantir's positioning in the AI race and all this regulation, and I'll see you in the next video.